Ready? Should we begin?
Yes.
This is a watercolor demonstration for the Utah Watercolor Society, April 7th, 2020. My name is Lester Lee, and I reside in Logan, Utah. Still doing all right?
Still doing all right.
I came prepared with a couple of different things that we could have done today, and this is one of them. This is my son and his fiance, and we went outside at the outskirts of town and took this picture. And I loved the wedding announcement, but I also loved the background. So I got on Photoshop. This is just what Photoshop can do. And on Photoshop, I took the two out and then extended the front part a little bit. And now I've got a nice composition where we've got a nice arrow going into the picture and a nice focal point, Clarkston, Utah. But ultimately, I decided on this photograph here, which I took in Trenton, Utah. And they tore down some of the more beautiful buildings that were alongside of this old granary. I think they call it a grain silo. And I have a feeling that someday they're going to take this down too, but it's got a train track coming up to it. And I caught this in the morning light as the sun was coming up over the hill, and it was just beautiful. So this is what we're going to paint tonight. You have my permission to paint along or to use this image later if you want to try and paint this. The only thing you have to be careful of is that you wouldn't be able to show it in a show someplace. But here's the initial sketch, and so I thought I would just review with you what I found as I sketched. Sketching is really, really important, because your sketch will actually talk to you. You'll see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. We still okay?
You are okay.
All right. One of the first things that you should do, in my opinion, when you're composing a picture is to put the emphasis in a position where it's natural. And one of the more natural positions that you can put it is just off center at a mathematical measurement called 0.375. That 0.375 and the symbol that goes along with it and the name that goes along with it is phi, or short for Phidias. And that's where I've located my main focal point. The next thing you probably should look at is if you've got good line direction. The line direction in the original photograph showed a nice direction coming down to the silo here, but on this side it seemed to go away from it instead of pointing to it. So in my initial sketch, I make sure that the line of the mountain comes down towards it instead of away from it. And I've got some other line direction going on in the picture by way of these large triangles that are found in the middle ground right here. And so those are going to be really nice to take us in. We also had an old interstate tractor trailer that I didn't want to put in the picture. And because I knew what was behind it, I just took the trailer out and put in the buildings that belong there. The third thing is, how strong can you make your focal point? Your focal point in this case needs to really shine, which just means this is where the detail needs to go, and the detail needs to be left out of everything else. So in other words, hard edges here, soft edges here. It's really that simple. And the next thing you probably want to look at is to see how many different things you can make that repeat themselves. Not just values, but mostly shapes. So if you look at the pre-sketch, you'll see that I've got these long sweeping triangles in here, and I thought, I wonder if we can make a composition out of those long sweeping triangles. And it just so happens that we found triangles in the mountains. We also found triangles in the top of the roof of the silo in both places. So I'm very excited about that aspect of it. The next thing you probably ought to think about is how you're going to transition a dark color to a light color. And sometimes that could be a little bush, or even things that you might not even consider to be very important. But a dark line here will help transition a dark area here into the white, and the white area will transition because of the dark area into the dark. The next thing I want to look for is contrasts and white. If you can keep parts of your paper pure white, including maybe even some pure white on our silos here, you're going to get a stronger feeling for your focal area. So we've already talked about what's soft and what's hard, and so we literally can begin our demonstration. So I'll keep that handy because that's really important to me, and I'll keep the photograph here too. I've got a piece of tape around here in case I need to pick up my paper to move it around, and I'll be sketching with a hard lead pencil, because I found that a soft lead pencil can leave graphite filings that will actually taint the whiteness of your paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I've got a nice area to paint inside of that will also fit a frame that I won't have to have custom made later. In this case, my template is 8 1/4 by 12 1/4. And with a 3-inch mat on it, that will fit into a 14 by 18 frame. I'm going to trace that template around. I got my pre-sketch handy, so I can make some initial marks on my paper. Again, I'm using a 5H. First place I want to start is perhaps somewhere that's not right in the center. And I do have the top of my train cars. I have added 2 other train cars there. In the photograph, there's only 1 train car, but I've added 2 others. So I can see about right here. I want to make a very light indication as to where the edge of my silos go and how high up they go. So I need to stop them about right there. And just how much space do they take? If my first silo is this big, and my second one is this big, and my third one needs to be this big, I've got now a nice indication as to where my silos are going to be. Is my head in the way if I bend over a little bit more?
You're good.
Okay. I'm in 2-point perspective here, so I'm going to fudge a little bit. Right here where I'm actually shot this up on a little hill, and so it makes me almost level to that. But I'm going to fudge a little bit and put an angle there, and that angle will actually bring my starting right there. I'm going to angle that down a little bit, but just a little. And then I'll angle it this way just a little. And I also need to angle my roof line down just a little. And by just a little, I mean enough to make it feel like those who are looking at it can see it in perspective. I thought about having this all already sketched out, but I think it's fun to watch the artist maneuver the undersketch too. I like to drag my pencil around just because it adds some interesting texture here and there. There I've made the angle of the roof line back there, which will be hard for you to see. But I'm trying to get in all of these marvelous little buildings that are down here that will make a big difference to the painting. There's a window here. And I'm not sure if there's a door in this other building, but I'm going to put one just because I can. And this building will just about go off the edge of the paper over here. We'll break it up a little bit, but let's put a door right there. I'm going to shade just a little bit, just so that I have a feeling where I'm going to be going with this. This silo needs to be up just a little bit. Otherwise it won't feel like it's behind. And then we've got some beautiful trees back here, which we'll give a line indication for. And here's where our train cars will start. So let's put the one right on the track. We want to make sure that it looks like a train. So we'll actually put the wheels there. And our second train car. And perhaps a third one going off the paper. We've got another little group of trees there, and a really nice, big, nice group of trees over here. Now's the part where we can put in some angles that will be really fun for us to deal with. So we've got a really strong angle coming across our paper this way, and there's some pure white that meets right there. And then we have another triangle of a snowbank there. And this will bring around a really, really great area of triangles. Now we've got some sweeping triangles that come the other direction that actually come across this way. Now the composition is starting to have some interest in it. We've got some transitionary things down here in the foreground, and a really nice big clump of bushes here, which will offset and balance out the picture a little bit there. They'll also act as some transitions. I'm feeling pretty good about everything so far. So good. Looks to me like that there's a little crow's nest up here, and I'm not sure what would be up there, but we'll put something up there. We'll swag the roof a little bit. Up until now I've been holding my pencil like this, which allows a little bit less pressure, and it puts me a little bit out of control, which is actually nice. Then you can come back later and put in a stiffer edge if you want to. So we've got some really, really great ladders or something going on right here. I'm still using my number 2 pencil, or number 5 pencil, and this number 5 pencil may actually be all of the value that I'll need right over there. So here's the other edge of my silo here, and the edge of my roof. So I'm really happy with the way the drawing's turning out. Let's get our mountain range in here, and the mountain range ends here. And remember, we changed it so that even though it was sliding down and away, this time we're going to bring it back. I feel pretty happy with the way things are. I want to give a small indication as to where the snow seems to fall on this mountain range back here. And I believe we can actually start adding some paint.
Lester, would you show him your palette?
Yeah.
If you put it right where the painting is.
This is my palette. This is actually not the palette that I use at home, but any palette works for me. I'm not a person who sticks to formulas, recipes, or rules. So it's just fun to use whatever's there. A color is a color. And so some people look down on me for that, for not thinking in higher terms, but I use Van Gogh paints for the most part. They have a fine ground to them. The colors are bright enough for me. And I don't spend a lot of money on Van Gogh paints. And like I say, I don't use formulas or rules necessarily. But in my palette, I've got some gamboge, and then my 2 cadmiums at least, a cadmium orange and a cadmium red and a vermilion. I like to keep several different kinds of blues. Over here we've got cerulean blue, the cobalt blue, and sometimes I keep I do keep an ultramarine blue here too, but sometimes I keep a phthalo, just in case I need a sky color. And I think there's probably some Payne's Gray over here. I never use Payne's Gray, but there's probably a Prussian there too that I probably won't use. But I use a phthalo quite often if I need a strong green. This is sap green and a hooker's green, and permanent green, and a permanent green light, and a permanent yellow green. And then I just keep the regular browns that you might imagine. Burnt umber and raw umber, both. I do keep a black, which makes a beautiful brown, addition to brown if you need it. And a rust brown, which can either be Indian brown. And I'm having a mind block now. What's the other?
Burnt sienna?
Burnt sienna is the one I'm thinking of. And then this is a raw sienna and a yellow ochre. I think most people keep those colors, but that's nice that you would chime in and ask me that. That could be important. First thing I'm going to do is tone my background a little bit, because I really want the silo to really shine. I want the silo to be my focal point, and so the background needs to be toned. I'm going to tone that with a cobalt, and a burnt sienna, I mistakenly got a little phthalo in there. It's okay. This will make a great toned color. Warm it up a little bit with my burnt sienna or Indian red and a lot of water, and we'll just tone that background. We're going to tone almost everything. I'm even going to tone over the top of my train cars. The purpose being, I really want only certain parts of the painting to be really strong. So even the silos are going to have some tone to them. We've got some beautiful, beautiful colors going on here, and I want to soften this edge just a little bit, and that will give us a feeling, a strong feeling of sunlight coming across. Our silo right there. That's really pretty. I'm really happy about that. So we can take I sometimes prefer cobalt blue over an ultramarine blue for my snow. We've got some great snow things going on down here. In the process of blocking in these snowy areas, I want to make sure that I leave little glimmers of white here and there too. The white will just be the sunshine breaking through some of the trees on the other side, perhaps. So that really breaks up the situation nicely right there. Let's take some of this blue and tone this this part of our building even more. Now is not a bad time to put in some initial. I'm using a number three-quarter flat brush, and it's fine touch. Let's put some of these trees back here in their initial stages. We've got a tree there, we've got a tree here. Remember, we want those to be soft. And we even have a tree here. We'll put a little there for now. Maybe something a tiny bit stronger right back here. Maybe something a little stronger right there, just so that our contrast is nice. Boy, isn't that's really starting to come out nicely now. Let's see if we can dry this off a little bit. I'm using a VT 1100 heat gun. I like a heat gun over a hairdryer because it will dry the paper quickly without pushing the paint all over the place. I hope it's starting to be evident now why we toned the paper in the background to create this beautiful white that we've got shining here. And when we put some darks over here, that white's going to be even greater. You should be able to get a feeling from your painting after the first 15 or so minutes of blocking it in. I don't ever stretch my paper to start with. If I paint so big that it warps so badly, then I just get a thicker paper. But you can stretch your project after, and it works just fine. So I'm going to clean my water here because my water's blue, and I'm after some strong oranges now. I'm going to over-exaggerate the orange feeling that's up here in the top of the silo, this roofed part. This is a strong cadmium orange with a little gamboge in it that I could mix. And I don't want it to be too dark because there's light shining on that. And I say I never use a Prussian blue or Payne's gray, but I just dipped into it just because there's a really pretty color right there that almost needs a Prussian. Now let's go really dark and see if we can get a feeling of what this is going to look like. This is burnt umber and black mixed together, and it so happens that there is a really strong area right there that requires a dark brown color, and probably even in the roof over here there is some bits of snow hanging onto that roof, so we'll make it even a little bit more interesting than it was. We're going to put our snow in a more interesting position. But that's a really great color, and all it is ultramarine or burnt umber. This roof over here has also got some interesting snow pieces, and I've switched now to a number 8 round, and let's see if we can make it look like there's some snow down here too. Then we'll go back to a really dark color, this time even more black than with my burnt umber, and see if we can create a nice contrast down here. We'll leave a ragged edge along the base of this to give us a snow-like feeling down here. While we're still a little bit wet, let's go ahead and put some of that dark right in that little cavity. Boy, isn't that pretty the way that's starting to turn out? So we need let's put a strong cobalt blue up here in our roof. There is some snow up on there. And while we're doing that, we can actually do some of our mountainous background there too. So let's do that. This is cobalt blue, toned down with a little bit of any warm color, and I'm just going to look at the photograph now and say to myself, this is all filled in here, and there's a little bit of, I don't really care what those mountains look like. What I do care about is the contrast that I'm going to get out of it. And so I'm just following with this very mild blue how the snow has fallen and how it's left certain parts of the mountain behind it. That's really all that needed right there, and we can do the same thing over here. Really, you're just making up stuff. Let some of the mountain show. That's wonderful. Now that's really great because our roof line right there was still wet, and now it's bleeding over into that roof line, so that's really nice. Let's get ourselves a strong blue on here for our snow later too. And that's actually got a little bit of cobalt. It's cobalt blue, but phthalo. It's got some phthalo in it too. I'm going to switch now back from my 3/4 flat back to a round. I think I can do just about, I could probably do the rest of the painting with a number 8 round. So let's get some warmth into these silos, and I'm going to start with the core shadow, even though you may not see a core shadow, there is one there. And then after we get that core shadow in there and let it sit for a minute, we'll bring in color around it. That core shadow will actually be really important here in a minute. Let's do that again. So we've got put a nice core shadow here. The core shadow, of course, is just where the shadow that gets trapped between the highlight and the reflected light. And as it comes down to the ground, it gets a little bit less intense because there's light shining up off the ground. So we'll just take some clear water in this case. We're going to bring that down. We're going to put a really nice dark piece here in between the two silos. And then go back to a cadmium orange as the reflected light comes along the edge of this silo over here. It is going to be really orange. And that really brings out some of the beauty in what's happening with reflected light. So we're probably going to get some of that orange all the way down on this, and probably on this silo too. Maybe a little in that one. Now there's starting to be some life come out. That's really, really a good move there for me. Let's take some more of that cadmium or that orange and put in our roof line there. We've got some other dark, beautiful dark things. Maybe a straight burnt umber right up here. And hopefully we're still wet enough that up in here that it may transfer up into the roof a little bit. Doesn't look like we were quite wet enough. Ooh, that's very pretty. All right, we got more blues down here because there's more snow on these roof lines. I'm starting to be excited about this now. We've got some fun things going on in our mountain. We've got some high contrasts. We've got some of our roof line bleeding into our mountain. We understand that it's probably a snowy situation. It's really very exciting. All right, we dry enough here. I'm going to burnt sienna, and let's try a little black with that, tone it down a little bit, and see if we can get a couple of train cars in here. They need to be believable. One train car may be slightly different in color than the next one, but they are silhouettes. And let's make this one really red. What will make that really believable is the rail that you're going to put underneath it. And this is still a number 8 round, and I'm using the very tip of it now to give ourselves a rail and some wheels that will make these train cars have an appearance of realism to them. It doesn't take much, does it? We'll come back and work on those again in a minute. I'm really excited about these silos. The colors we've got going in there are just tremendous. So let's see if we can get some soft things going on in our trees back here. My water's a little bit dirty, and I don't care because that will actually tone the paper a little bit more. So now we're going to do an overwash. I'm using a number 3/4. I'm going to paint around my boxcars. And I think we're wet enough. We want to equalize the paper a little bit so that it isn't pooly. And we'll actually let the water run off one side. These trees have some orange in them, but it's a really fun thing to do, to come in with raw umber and add a little black to it. And let's get some of these contrasts going here. And in the tops of these trees, we'll add a little bit of cadmium orange to the tops of these trees. And we want a soft feeling. Let's make these trees that are right over here a little redder. Remember, no detail. In these areas here. So here's the tops of these trees. We're going to try and get a kind of a triangular feeling in those trees. And then the foliage always seems to increase about halfway down, and that leaves a funny little part right in the middle where your branches can show. So we've got some trees over here too. Now the fun thing about those trees is, if you really want them to be soft, you've got to start turning your paper, and that is just magic. That's magic what's happening right there. We're getting some sway and some beautiful, I want them to be a little taller. I pound my paper, and that will make my trees grow a little bit. Oh, that's terrific. While those trees do their thing, we've got some trees over here that are begging for some of that very same action. So we'll take a number 12, and let's come over here and see if we can get some trees to do the same thing over here. This is clear water. You should sit down.
Oh, I'm good.
Back to the raw umber. put the bigger tree on the outside and the smaller trees on the inside, and that way it gives you a little directional line. We've got a nice big tree right there, and that's going to be really awesome right there. Let's see if we can make a transition down in here now that we've got some really fun things that we can do now. We'll take some blue, take that blue with the number 12 and put a transitionary color across the snow right here. And while that's still a little bit wet, I'll take a number 8 and go back to our dark burned umber that's got a little black in it. Let's try a little green. I don't know why, but a little green underneath this this building right here. Let's leave a little space for a door just because. I think this can be darker. And we can run that color right down into the tops of these. I told you it was fun. Super fun. Let's try, let's see if we can get a gradient underneath this eave right here. And we'll do that by putting the color down darker and then clear water here. And that will give us a gradient. So now we've got a really I want to make sure that I keep a sharp edge on that. Now we don't really care what's going on down in here. We understand that there's blue, that's probably snow. There's blue there, that's probably snow. There's maybe a doorway there. And there's a place for a little window right here. And we can put that window in there and everybody will know what it is. I'm using a number 0 now to see if I can add some clarity to this little roof line up here. It's really starting to have really fun effect there. Let's see if we can scrape in this paper over here. We just want people to believe there might be some trees there. This is an X-Acto knife. And the X-Acto knife will leave a ditch for the water to go into if it's too wet, and it will scrape it away clean if it's dry. But remember, we don't care. We don't care what's going on over here because this is where we're looking. Pretty exciting. We can make these train cars just a little bit darker. And let's see if we can add an element that would make them look even more like a train car. So some train cars will have slats. There should be no mistake now that that's a train car, and there's a good chance that it will have a nice shadow underneath it. We don't care what color that is right now, it just happens to be green. I really love that tree back there. Okay, let's make these silos look round, and then we'll do a few things in the foreground. We'll be done with this little painting. Is it still showing up okay?
Yes, yes, looks great.
All right. I'm going to go to back to a number 8, and we need to add some definition to these. And if you look at the photograph, you'll see that it is really dark. And what I said before was true, and that is that it's darker up here where there's less reflected light and lighter down here. So we can add a really strong brownish, blackish color right in that area. Nice and clean, nice straight mark. And as it comes this direction, down direction, it will get smaller and smaller. And put some color, a brown color in there. Oh, that's pretty. I love the way that kind of went right over the top of that, and I'm not going to change that. And then back to a more orange and a gamboge color for this section over here. We have a really, my goal was to get some white out of this, and it really did work. I'm really happy with that. So we got a little bit of snow up on this roof too. Mostly a very dark roof with bits of snow hanging on. And there's a nice piece under there. Let's add some yellow, in this case gamboge, to this silo here. And see if we can really bring a reflected light feeling into that. But be really careful not to paint over the white. But that was magic right there. That really worked. And we can take that yellow, we can take that gamboge all the way to the ground. But as it gets closer to the ground, it might even actually be a little more orange. Let's repeat that color someplace else, because we don't want it to be by itself. There's a good place right here in this boxcar to put a little bit more yellow. I feel like we need a darker shadow underneath our boxcars and perhaps a more indication of a rail. That didn't hurt at all. I'm very excited about all of this. It just turned out so good. And I'm glad it didn't all stay clean. I'm glad it ran a little bit. Let's put some detail in. All right, back to a 3/4. We're closing in on a final product here. Back to cobalt blue. It's really toned down. And let's see if we can bring in a higher contrast along this front edge where I know this number 12 will give us a nice, we've got a nice bit of, down in this wet area, we've got actually got a roadway coming in right there, and it turns the corner right there, so we'll turn the corner with it. That turned out great right there. There's actually a fun, I'll take my liner brush now, and there's a tree out in the foreground, or in the middle ground, that I didn't see in the photograph originally, and it actually comes up right in here. And we can add some detail to these trees now too. We've got 2 or 3 trunks of trees coming up right in there. We'll do some dry brushing over the top of that in a minute. There's a really nice dark area right there. And this one too. All right, gonna get some clean water to finish up the project. Let's start by doing some really strong gamboge in the wheat fields that are shining through. Probably add a little bit of cadmium orange to it. Let's see if we can get some a nice sweeping feeling across here. And there's a great sweeping feeling of color coming across there as well. While we have that color there, let's go ahead and add, with the raw sienna or yellow ochre, we can add some bushes where we knew they were going to be. And we can take a yellow ochre and put in a few darker areas, because there are a few darker areas. Let's sweep across this foreground, this middle ground. I think I'll take that same color and run it. Now we've got a little bush growing there that I didn't even plan on, and it's actually not in a bad place, so we'll just leave it. Let's add transitionary color there underneath it. We can also add, we add a big bush right here, and that's yellow ochre and burnt umber. We want to make sure that the bottom part of these bushes remain flat. If they don't remain flat across the bottom, then they'll come forward, and we don't really want them to come forward. So let's bleed out that top edge a little bit, give it a more bushy feeling. Isn't that great? And we can do that same thing, maybe even with a gray color. We've got a gray bush right down in here. And add a little gray pieces along here. I use my fingernail to scrape through that because it was too fat. Let's see what else we can do here. We can add a little bit of pale blue, and it has to be very, very pale, almost water itself, to show some modulation underneath these bushes down here. And it will be enough to tell our audience that we have a foreground and we have a middle ground too. So let's put a little bit of that color right in there. We don't want to delete our white if we can help it. One of the last things you can do then is take your liner brush or an X-Acto knife and indicate a field or a field-like experience. There's some nice dark streaks coming across our snow right here, which could just be pieces of road that are showing through. And this is a burnt umber. We'll connect up with this road and make the corner a little sharper right there. This is all, I'm doing all of this with the liner brush. And we've got our catwalk up here that had something on it, and we don't really care what. We will add a little bit more texture to the front part of this. These are the punches. Everybody likes putting in the punches. We just don't like to wait. Most of us would like to do it a lot sooner than you should. There's a nice little window right here or something that will break up this space. And a few little odds and ends, a little streak right there, and probably some more streaks in the wood that's right up here. Maybe a dark piece or two underneath the parts of our railroad cars. Perhaps another door there, maybe two doors, maybe a streak or two here. You know as well as I do that you can overpaint really easily. We'll put some shadow underneath these bushes, make them feel like they're grounded. And one other thing that I can't seem to do without, and that is to splatter a little bit. And then sign a name.
Lester, that is just gorgeous.
Huh? Go ahead, you like it.
It is really, really beautiful. Okay. All right. Here, if you hold that up.
Are you getting a picture of me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Here's Lester Lee, our fantastic artist. Here is his beautiful piece. And I hope you are all staying safe and well, and we hope to see you in person soon. Thank you.